Okay, so I got a note the meeting's now streaming live on YouTube. Did you do anything different, Brian?
I followed directions. I don't think it's coming up.
Okay, so I got a note the meeting's now streaming live on YouTube. No. Did you do anything different, Brian?
I followed directions. I don't think it's coming up.
What do you think, Brian? Are we willing to do it without streaming on YouTube?
Yeah, there's a delay. It's annoying.
There's the delay, Howard. We have to record this for public knowledge. There was supposed to be another icon.
Without streaming on YouTube?
Yeah, there's a delay. It's annoying.
There's the delay, Howard. We have to record this for public.
I'm gonna hit the record button,
There's supposed to be-
and but it doesn't give me permission. Okay,
Hey.
Brian, do you have the record button at the bottom? I'm gonna hit the record button, and but it doesn't give me permission. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, only a host.
Brian, do you have the
or-
record button at the bottom? I'm gonna hit the record button, but it doesn't give me permission.
Yeah, only a host. or-
Bottom of the screen, it says record. Do you see it?
Yeah, it doesn't do anything.
Howard, is that better?
I can hear you.
Well, let's see if we get an echo. We'll wait a few moments and
Looks like it is better now.
yeah, it doesn't do anything.
Howard, is that better?
Yes, it is.
No, we still have an echo.
No, we
Let's see if
still.
we get an echo. We'll wait a few moments and
Looks
And if you mute your Zoom, that will fix it for us. It won't fix it for you.
Brian, could you mute your Zoom and then tie in via phone or something like that so you could get the audio part to you?
So Brian can just unmute when he is ready to chime in.
Oh, okay. So just not, Brian, can you still hear us? Okay. Are we ready to go ahead? How about that? Okay. Starting from the beginning again, let's call the meeting to order. Thank everybody for coming today. Sorry for the little bit of inconvenience that we had. Approval of the minutes. I would like to add one thing to the minutes under new business. I talked to somebody with regard to food drives at the farmer's market. So under new business, I'd like to discuss that briefly with everybody. Does anybody else have any changes to the minutes that they would like to make? Okay, if not, why don't we move to approving?
Wendy hit her hand up.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry, Wendy, I didn't see.
A totally little thing. And on the minutes in item number 5, Ruth's title is Niles Township General Assistance Director.
Oh, okay. Why don't you hold off just one moment? Because that was the next thing I was going to say is approval of December 1st minutes. And anyways, first of all, I did want to start.
Agenda. I'm sorry, my brain is fried.
No, that's okay, Wendy. Thanks. I just, before I asked for comments on it, I just wanted to thank Joe for taking the minutes again. It's a lot of work. She did a great job on it. So now we ask for corrections. Wendy.
Who came from Township, her title is General Assistance Director.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks. Any other comments, corrections? Do you want to, should we, did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, otherwise we could take a minute or two for you to take a look at them.
It says now.
What did Wendy just say? I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Wendy, do you want to repeat that one again?
Sure. In I'm sorry, in section 5, under guest speakers, Ruth Orme Johnson, her title is Niles Township General Assistance,
Oh,
like to assist someone, like general assistance.
got it. Thanks.
Very good. Any other
Like,
comments or corrections?
So minor.
No problem. No, that's got to get the right titles. In that case, why don't I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from December 1st? Who do I hit? Okay, Sajan, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Great. Any objections? Okay, minutes approved. Thanks. Some brief remarks that I have. I won't spend much time. Unfortunately, due to the increase in COVID cases as a result of the Omicron variant, we were forced to go back to the Zoom meetings, as you all know. Again, fortunately, the number of reported COVID cases in the United States has dropped by 44% in the last 14 days. And in Illinois, it's dropped by 60%. That's per the New York Times. So hopefully we'll feel comfortable to meet next time in person again, but it's all going to obviously depend on the directions this virus takes. And we've all learned from example that to try to project or predict what's going to happen is folly. The virus has its own minds. So I really hope everybody has received their COVID vaccine booster shots. If not, I believe they're still available with the Village. And if not with the Village, certainly at many of the pharmacies and other major retailers around the city. So please get your booster. You're doing it for yourself and for everybody else. Yesterday, I received an email from Vicky Varga that we have a new commissioner, Nancy Schwartz. She's been appointed. However, I didn't get any contact information, so I wasn't able to let her know about the meeting today. I will contact her as soon as I get that information and certainly invite her to next month's meeting. Vicky also said that at the upcoming February 7th board meeting, Village board meeting, all the commissioners are going to be reappointed. So, yahoo, nobody's getting booted off the commission. With that, why don't I turn it over to Brian and for a Health and Human Services report.
Well, just to kind of echo what Harold already said, that the cases are going down. We're still doing the shots on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Things are going along. It's, February, they're getting ready for the tax season in March. So they'll be opening up, taking appointments for that. That's all I have to report on at this time. And the co-responder program, it continues to be busy. We're over 100 calls already with over 130 follow-up calls. So it's going well. Great.
Brian, have you heard anything about your replacement in the Village in Human Services?
They've received applications, and they'll be calling up applicants to schedule interviews.
Okay.
So soon, hopefully March.
Okay, that'll relieve you a little bit, a little less work. Okay. Why don't we? Oh, there's a question over here, Annie. You're on mute.
For Skokie, what's the mandate? Like, you have to wear a mask for sure in any place you go, right?
Correct.
And if you're on a committee or anything like that, you have to be vaccinated, or you're not allowed to ask, you're not allowed to know?
I don't think that's a requirement. Brian, have you heard different?
No.
Okay, it's not like Chicago where they've mandated that all employees. Of course, as a committee, we're not employees.
No, but we will be sitting in the same room
Yes.
at one point. It's just asking clarification. Okay. Thank you.
Well, fortunately, Skokie has a very high percentage of people who've gotten at least 2 vaccinations. So,
Mm.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments, questions? With that, I'd like to turn it over to, sorry. Hang on. Shut her down. Okay, I'd like to turn this over to Mike Steele. Let me give you a brief introduction to Mike Steele, who's commissioner on our commission. Mike is a senior policy analyst employed by Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago. He provides analytic support for government and nonprofit organizations. He's provided support to small projects like urban neighborhood revitalizations and to large multi-divisional system planning projects in child welfare, juvenile justice, and public education. As a senior policy analyst, Mike has worked directly with senior level decision makers and their administrative teams around the country, providing them with policy and implementation support for program improvement. Mike will discuss demographic changes in Skokie based on 2020 census. So hopefully I got that correct, Mike. Turn the mic over to Mike.
Thanks, Harold. Yeah, I mean, more or less, that's what the resume says. So
That's where I got it from.
now I have to seem competent and share my screen and not mess that up. So let's see. All right, there we go. So let me start. There, how's that? Can everybody see it?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Harold and I sort of exchanged some emails about this, and what I threw together tonight was just some data about the village of Skokie and how it's changed from 2010 to 2020. You know, we're sitting at kind of this great moment in time when a lot of really great census data is starting to come out. And I just thought it would be kind of interesting to look and see how the village has changed and see if it can provide any insights into the work that we're doing here on the commission. As I go through this, feel free to interrupt me or ask any questions. Otherwise, we can talk some more at the end. I might go through it a little bit quick because I know I have a limited amount of time on the agenda to get through all this. So just as an overview, there are 2 types of census data. There's Diceenial Census data and American Community Survey data. And the only reason that's relevant is that the American Community Survey data is only current through 2019. Now, normally it would be available through 2020, but there were a whole bunch of problems with it, and they're hoping it will come out sometime this year, but it's not out. And the reason that matters is, as the name describes, it is a survey. So American Community Survey data is available every single year. So normally in December of 2021, the 2020 data would have come out. It's a sample, so it has a margin of error to it. The Diceenial Census is the one we're really all familiar with. That's the one that was conducted in 2020 with, you know, the forms come to your house, you fill them out. And that's the one that gets used for drawing elected representative boundaries, all kinds of apportionments of federal programs. So that's really the one that counts, but it only comes out every 10 years. So we use the ACS data to fill in between and hope that it's close enough. And then when the actual Diceenial Census data comes out, we're almost always surprised by something. So I'm going to give you just a real high level overview of the census data, and it's vast. There's just tons of it. So I'm just going to hit the high points. And my goal here is to try and provide like kind of a baseline for how the village has changed, maybe identify some possible issues in the village for the commission to think about. And maybe it'll help us at down the road identify some policies or programs the village might want to implement or some directions that the commission might want to go in. So I'm just hitting these 7 characteristics. Like I said, the census is just incredibly big. If when we finish this, there are things that you want to explore further, I'm sure that we can do that. But I'm going to give just an overview of demographics, households, education, citizenship, employment, housing, and a little bit of data around disabilities in the village. So let's start with population and demographics. The good news is that Skokie grew by about 4.7%, a little over 3,000 residents. That's a bit of a surprise. The ACS data for 2019 was showing Skokie having no population growth. So good for Skokie for beating the estimates. It's becoming a more diverse community. So for the first time, I think, it is now a majority minority community, just barely, at 50.3%, not white. However, Skokie is getting older. So this graph on the right-hand side, the gray shaded area is just the distribution of the total number of people in the village by age category. The blue line is 2019, the gray is 2010. So the way to interpret this is if you go out to the tail end here around 65, you see how much higher that blue line is than the gray line? That shows you that there's a lot more people aged 64 to 74 in the village in 2019 than there was in 2020. So that makes sense because Skokie has gotten older. The average age in the village has increased 1.4 years to about 43.7. So that's largely due to that big shift towards the right-hand side of that graph. The other thing that's notable, and it will come up later on, is this big dip here around people the ages 20 to 24. So that's a pretty substantial decrease, and it'll come up in the education section a little bit. You can see there was a significant amount of growth in pretty much, the Asian community, the Latino community, the Black or African American community. What's really interesting too, and I know it's a small number, there was quite a bit of growth in the 2 or more races category, and this is something we're seeing nationally. And there's quite a bit of debate about whether or not that's people who are choosing to represent themselves differently, or whether that's actually people who actually are 2 or more races. And that will also come up a little bit later in the slide deck. So let's talk about households and families. Just as a quick definition, the census considers a household any group of individuals living in the same housing unit. So that could be a family, that could be roommates, that could be anybody kind of sharing a space. Now, families in the census are a group of people living together who are biologically or related through adoption. So there's about 63,000 people in Skokie. There's about 22,000 households. Now, what's really interesting, and I checked this number a bunch because I thought it was wrong, was that about 34% of all the households, not individuals, but households in Skokie are family households with individuals living alone, which means that they have families, but they're not living with their children and they don't have a spouse. So, and you can see the growth here. The blue bar is 2010 and this is 2020. So that's, it's increased from 10% to 34% of the households are now in that status. The other thing that's really interesting, and again, we're looking at ACS data, so there's a margin of error to this, and some of this could be an error, but there's a huge growth in family households. 96% of the households in the American Community Survey are family households now, meaning that there's very, very few households left that are just sort of roommates or people that are unrelated living together. And you can see that here, non-family households, there's been a big decline. Interestingly, there's been also a bit of an increase in households with people over 65, which I think was explained by the shift in overall demographics, but not a huge growth in households with people under the age of 18. So education, the big story is that enrollment has decreased twice as fast as the school age population. So that, I think, is largely a part of the college enrollment is down 28%. So people in this college or graduate school age range, this is population over 3 years old enrolled in school, it's down pretty substantially. And so remember, these are people living in the village that are over 3, that are in college or graduate school. So it doesn't necessarily mean there are fewer residents in that age group in college. It just means that they're not in Skokie in college, if that makes sense. There has been a small, it's only 342, but it's a 46% jump and daycare enrollment. So you can see this down here in the preschool. It's enough to make preschool go from 4% of the total population to 7%. So for most of the different grade areas, you see decreases, right? College, high school, elementary school is the same, kindergarten's down, but preschool is up. Part of that, I think that's in this slide, I did it somewhere in the deck, there are more of the parents who live in Skokie, more of them are both working out of the house than ever before. So that may be part of why we see this increase in preschool. There was also a jump in grandparents as caregivers to their grandkids, particularly in the 3 to 4 year old age range. So about 40% of Skokie's residents are foreign born. That stayed constant basically over the last 10 years. What did change was that there was a 7% increase in naturalized citizens, which I would assume means that some of those foreign born residents were naturalized. The big problem with census data is it's tough to make assumptions like that, because in theory, you could have a bunch of non-naturalized foreign born residents move out and an equal number of naturalized residents move in, and that would make those numbers move the same way. So it's really hard to know why this has occurred, but it has. The foreign born population from Asia was the largest, and it grew by 8%. And there was a large, the largest number of households that spoke a language other than English were Indo-Europeans. But what's interesting is if you look at Spanish, it's one of the smaller ones at 9% of the total, but the growth was 30% over the last 10 years. And of that 9%, 23% self-identified as not speaking English well, which is very different from the other languages. You can see it's like, relatively small growth in that. And actually the total number is pretty high. So this is an interesting change. Although if you look at the Indo-European languages, 10% here do identify that they speak English less than well as well. There's just not a lot of growth in that area. So Skokie's labor force shrank by 8%. Now, this is not unemployment. This is just the total number of people who are actually out there working. And again, this kind of makes a certain amount of sense. As we've seen Skokie get older and more people move into their retirement years, the total number of people available to work has gone down. What is interesting is there are 24% more households that earn greater than $100,000 a year in Skokie. So it's one of the biggest growth areas in terms of households. Again, like I was saying, families that where both parents are working are up 22%. The big change in the industries in Skokie are retail. So you can see this right here. Retail had one of the biggest percentage decreases, and it's the third largest industry in Skokie. So even though if you go down to like agriculture, it's a 60% decrease, there's almost no jobs in that. So a small number makes a big percentage change. In retail, this is a substantial number. So it's a big change. What's kind of interesting is it's offset a little bit by this giant growth in transportation and warehousing in Skokie. I wanted to point out that there's a big difference in household income between family households and non-family households. So the median household income for families is $115,000. For non-families, it's $37,000. And so you can see here, again, this is one of these graphs where the gray is 2010 and the blue is 2019. This tail out here shows you that there's been a big increase in the number of families over 100,000. And there's been kind of a decrease on the lower end of the scale. So Skokie's overall income distribution has shifted to the right towards the more higher income. This one's showing you all the income in 2019. So the orange line is non-family. So you see it kind of peaks here in the middle, like around that 37,000. But you can see the majority of folks that are non-family households, which we saw shrink a great deal in Skokie, on the lower end of the income spectrum, whereas the family households are on the higher end of the income spectrum. The number of housing units in Skokie has basically remained the same. It's down, minus 0.2%. That's like 100 units. But despite the similar number of units, the makeup has changed a little bit. So you can see over here on the right-hand side, there's a little bit, there's about 300 more single units. That's both attached and detached homes. The big story is there's a big loss of two unit buildings. So almost half of them are gone over the last 10 years. And even though they're not a big part of the village, that's a pretty big change. There was also a decrease in 3 and 4 units. In fact, most multi-units lost ground until you get to the bigger ones. And in fact, there was a fair amount of growth in 20 or more unit structures. More residents are renting and rent burden is increasing. So this chart down here in the blue, these are houses with a mortgage. Orange are houses without a mortgage. So in theory, they're paid off or they were bought with cash. And then the gray bars are rental units. And so you can see that units without a mortgage are up 13%, which again might fit with folks retiring. People in rental units are up 17%. So even though there are fewer, in theory, rental units, they might be renting more single family homes or attached single units. The cost of having a house with a mortgage has changed not at all. It's remained flat for the last 10 years. But the cost for a house without a mortgage has gone up 28%. And the cost for rental units is up 22%. Now, the reason for this is that the cost for housing units without a mortgage is relatively small because it's just, it's your monthly cost. So it's probably just your property taxes and utilities. But the reason this is kind of a big deal is when you look at this awful acronym, which just stands for selected monthly owner costs as a percentage of income. So this is people spending more than 30% of their income on housing. You can see the number of homeowners with a mortgage who are spending more than 30% of their income on housing has decreased 42% in the last 10 years. But for people without a mortgage, it's gone up 40%. So even though the relative number is low relative to their income, it's a big increase. And the same thing with renters. So the final set of data I want to run through is that the census collects a limited amount of information on residents with disabilities. Over the last 10 years, there's been a pretty substantial decrease in Skokie residents with disabilities. It's down 30%, and that represents more than 2,200 residents. The distribution of disabilities has remained largely the same, with ambulatory difficulties remaining number 1. And then things like independent living difficulties being number 2. And then so the total number has gone from about 11.5% of the village residents to 8. And the only thing that was really that sort of stood out here was this tiny number. There's 123 more children under the age of 18 with cognitive disabilities. That's a 170% increase. So not a huge total number, but kind of a significant jump. The other thing that's interesting is in 2010, there were many more female residents of Skokie, 61% that had a disability. And you can see it evens out to more of a 50-50 split by 2019. And this is in part because there was just a large number of men with disabilities that there's more of them in 2019 than there were before. Let's see. So in general, just looking at those couple of data points, we can see that Skokie is a growing village and it's becoming more diverse. That's particularly true. I did a whole bunch of data that I didn't show here looking at people under the age of 25 versus people over the age of 45. And you can see the diversity is it's a vastly different world. We've seen this increase in residents with families, but they're living alone. We've seen fewer residents enrolled in school, but that's mostly, I think, because of that college number. Skokie is getting older. It faces a shrinking labor force and a changing mix of local industries, so that decrease in retail and increase in warehouse transportation. It is seeing the cost of housing for renters and homeowners without a mortgage increase, and it's seen a decrease in the number of residents with disabilities. So, what could we do next with this data? Well, there's a bunch of different things we could do. We could start breaking out this data by different parts of the village. We could map it out and see where these things are happening. We could, ask questions like, what are the implications on the types of services that the village could be pursuing? Are there other or better sources of data that could help us understand the things that we're interested that we saw tonight? Are there things in Skokie's, strategic plan, or I always forget what it's called, but those focus groups that they hold to see if there's other information that would support or somehow explain what's in the census? Or are there policy ideas like we've talked about the AARP livable cities a few times that might provide directions for how we could address some of the needs that Skokie's residents have? So that's what I threw together. If there are any questions, I'm happy to try and explain the data.
Yeah, Mike, this was incredible information you presented and almost mind-boggling, the scope and the amount that's there. I think it's going to take everybody a little bit of time to do some digesting. But with that, let me leave it open to questions. I'm sure there are plenty. So Bonnie has a question.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. That was really fascinating. And without having it in front of me, I think I had a few questions as you were talking, but the one that I remember, so you showed that preschool enrollment was up. And I'm wondering if you can predict based on that kindergarten enrollment, which had been trending down, would go up as a result, that those preschoolers, will they be enrolling in kindergarten and then in, middle school after that? Is that like a likely forecast?
I mean, that would be my assumption, right? I mean, the two things that go together there are that increase in families that are working, where both parents are working. It matches up really well with the number of kids in preschool and that increase in grandparents watching 3 to 4 year olds. So those are all indicators I would think that would be the case. There's nothing that would lead me to believe that people that have children that age would move out of the village by the time they went in elementary school. Like, you do see that in Chicago a lot. That age group, they leave when kindergarten starts, but I don't think you'd see that out here.
So you can look at those numbers as a trend predictor. So even though it's been trending downward in some of those other demographics, you would expect that that trend will shift as those preschoolers get older and those families stay.
My guess would be the limiter on that is the fact that there's not been an increase in housing. So I know this is a trend nationwide that baby boomers in general have been living in their homes longer than previous generations. So that makes it harder for families to move in because there's not a place for them to go to.
Right. So they might not be coming in, but if the ones that are here stay, which those statistics would lead you to expect that they'll stay, then you can predict or expect that certain trends will result.
Yeah, there was also just a real small increase in family size overall. And I'm not quite sure why that is, because that could mean more kids. It could also mean grandpa's moved in. It's hard to say why, but I think it's an interesting question about childcare, right? Because we know the childcare providers right now are struggling. We know that parents are having a hard time paying for that. It's expensive, it's hard to get into. And with COVID, so many of these providers have had to close down.
Right.
So it's that would be a space I would love to explore more and see if we could find more data that would, help us understand how big of an issue that really is.
Thank you.
Mike, a couple people had put in the chat comments that they would like to get a copy of the PowerPoint of the presentation. Is that something that you could make available to me and I could distribute it?
Yeah, in fact, what I'd like to do, Harold, is I have both the PowerPoint, but I have an Excel sheet that's all cleaned up that I'd like to send you to with all kinds of extra data and like breakouts. And so I'd love to send that around to everybody because it's possible they'll see something that I missed.
Excellent. Okay, so if you send it to me, I'll distribute it to everybody.
Okay.
With that, a request, if anybody wants to ask any additional questions, do you know how to use the reactions to put up a hand? It doesn't work on all media, all computers with the Zoom, but for those who have Microsoft, at the bottom of the screen, there's a button that says reactions. You click on that on the lower right-hand side, and then there's a bar that says raise hand. So if you click raise hand, you get a hand come up. And if you, whoops, hang on, just lost you. Sorry about that. Somehow I just lost, hit the wrong button there. And if you click lower hand, it goes away. So if you could use that to ask questions, I'd appreciate. Otherwise, if you don't have access to it, then just raise your hand and hopefully we'll catch sight of it. Sajan, you're on. You're on mute.
All right. First of all, I would like to thank Mike for the excellent presentation. It was so amazing and so much of valuable information. I want to thank him for that. Secondly, a small question, in the slides I saw in some places the comparison years. In one place it is, in many places 2020, and the remaining slides it is 2019. I know that the census was in 2020. So is there any reason why the 2019, was it a typo or was the data collected previously? I was just curious.
Yeah, anywhere you see 2010 to 2019, it's that American Community Survey data. And that's the data where the census calls people and they get them to answer over the phone. They do that as a sample, so they're not talking to everyone. When you see it say 2010 to 2020, that's the census data where they went to everybody's house, and like that's the stuff that gets used for apportionment. So that's the difference. And normally I'd be able to match them up, but I'll spare you the inside baseball on this, but there was just a terrible train wreck at the census with the latest round of American Community Survey data. And so they have postponed its release. It should have been out in December.
Oh, okay.
So the issue is that what's cool about the Diceenial Census is that it's super accurate. What's not cool about it is it has very limited information. It will only tell us the total number of people. It'll tell us who's over 18 and who's under 18. And then it breaks it out into race and ethnic categories, because its only purpose in the world is to figure out how to draw election boundaries. So when we want to get into things like household income, disabilities, that's all done with the survey.
Oh, I see. Because I was wondering, because most of us do the census, we did the census online, we answered questions online. So I never had that opportunity to answer through the American that survey that you are talking about. Maybe. So was it affecting everybody in the households in Skokie, or were they asking questions to those people who were not mailed the census questionnaire?
That's a good question. So I've also, in the 30 years I've worked with census data, never been part of the American Community Survey. No one's ever called me and asked the question. They're generally doing some kind of population sample. Now, the good news is those data don't count for things like elected representation or financial funding. They're just to help us kind of get through in between. Like prior to the year 2000, you'd have to wait 10 years to find out what happened to your community. And the census is just trying to give us little sample snapshots along the way. And what I think is super exciting is that they were predicting Skokie was not going to grow at all. And it grew by almost 5%, which means that all that get out do the census stuff in Skokie really paid off, because we exceeded their population estimates by 5%.
Yes. And we can feel that population growth.
And it means that we'll get more federal funding and a whole bunch of other things as a result.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much for that info.
Great. Any other questions? Mike, one of the things is I would like to continue this next month also, as people have more of a chance to digest some of the information that you're presenting, and when they get to see the PowerPoint, look at it again.
Sure.
Arnie, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did. I hope I'm off mute.
Yes.
About 25 years ago, I was on the school board for over 12 years. And one of the things that this current survey brings to mind is how in our school bring in the Skokie Park District for developing preschool and day off activities for when the schools were off school, and bring in the grandparents who were doing more childcare. I think this is a note of how we need to be bringing some Skokie agencies to be working together, not only with the school districts, but family services with the Skokie Park District in relation to some of the coming needs that this particular survey points out.
Good. I agree. We will have to be discussing to see how, as a commission, we could be making recommendations to the village with regard to the population trends that we see, and maybe there are some areas that we as a commission can also get involved in to fill some of the apparent needs. One example that I saw, for instance, that was pretty pronounced change was the increase in people living alone in the village, and very likely a good number of those people are older people. So the question becomes, are there special needs that these people have that the village or us as a commission can be looking to focus on? It gets back again to education, to I'll leave it at education and things such as that there may be a particular interest in.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting number too. I would like to do more work to figure out who those folks are, because if they are seniors, it on a day like today, it begs the question, are you okay? Can you get out of your house? Are you snowed in? Do you need food? Like, I don't know how old they are. Maybe they're not, maybe they're perfectly capable. Maybe they're not. I don't know. But it's an interesting question to ask. It's a pretty startling increase.
I was also thinking in terms of mental health with the pandemic and COVID and living alone and being so isolated. That's another thing, that wondering who they are, like you said, and what we might do to help.
Last year in 2020, when COVID first started, or last year, 2 years ago, we developed a senior reassurance program in Health and Human Services, where we went through our database of all the seniors that we've serviced over the years and through their age, developed this database where we'd start reaching out to them and calling them to check in on them, see how they were doing with food and medicine and things like that. We've continued that program as well. We have an intern that's taken the job on full force and has done a great job with it. So we're continuing to do that.
Great. Are there any other thoughts, questions? Yeah, Annie.
Who is that person? Who is the person, Brian, who's in charge of that senior reassurance program?
Well, I would put, Mike Charlie is the director. Irish Burials.
Oh, yeah.
But there's also the intern is Maddie Bowen, who's our intern. She's a first-year MSW student out of Jane Addams.
What's Iris's last name? I forgot.
Barrios.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions or comments, Mike, again, thanks. Incredible presentation. Really appreciate that. It's nice to see we have such amazing resources on our commission. So
happy to do it. Thanks for asking.
Great. Okay. With that, why don't we move to old business? The first item that I had on the old business we had discussed last month or 2 months ago was creation of subcommittees. And briefly, the reason I was thinking of putting together a subcommittee is we try to, as a commissioners, we try to think of initiatives. Sometimes there's a challenge when you get too many people together and try to brainstorm, come up with ideas. The thought that if you get a much smaller group that can focus on particular issues, that they'd be more effective at coming up with some ideas that then can be presented to the commission for further discussion and possibly determining how, if we want to go ahead with something and how we go about doing that. So last, I guess it was December, I had suggested a couple thoughts. First of all, is subcommittees, if we put them together, and I really hope that we do get several of them together, we have to keep them fairly small, 3 to 5 people. And part of the reason is we want to stay in compliance with the Open Meetings Act. A certain amount of commissioners come together, you could wind up, if too many come together, you could be in violation of the act. So the 3 areas that I proposed was, hang on a second, let me just, okay. A subcommittee that would deal with issues that would involve seniors, another subcommittee that could deal with issues that would involve people with disabilities, and a third subcommittee, which would deal with at-risk youth and families. And to give you ideas of some of the initiatives that we had in the past, I mean, certainly the Boomers and Beyond Senior Resource Fair would be one of those, something similar to that would be one of the things that would come out of a seniors subcommittee. When we do our farmers market initiative, the food pantry initiative, that could be a populations at risk. We had in the past talked about a number of different initiatives that could address particular needs of people with disabilities. We went around and around with several of them, and we never quite got them off the ground. But if a small subcommittee were to put more of a focus into some of the more immediate issues, maybe we can make more headway on putting something together there. So let me throw it out. Are there any questions, thoughts about this? Let me ask, would there be a general interest over here to participate on a subcommittee? And I'm thinking these subcommittees would meet infrequently. It wouldn't be a monthly meeting unless that's what your subcommittee decided and wanted to do. It could be several times a year or as needs allow or needs require.
I would be interested in either the senior or the disability subcommittee. Okay.
What I would really like to do is have you send me everybody who's interested, send me an email by next week. And hopefully we can generate enough interest to get several subcommittees up and running. And I think you'll find this a productive way of addressing issues, or at least developing issues. And again, if there isn't interest, okay, so be it. We'll just deal with things at the commission meetings. Okay, any other thoughts in that regard?
Harold?
Yeah.
I wonder if the subcommittees that we choose should be informed based on Mike's data. So like the seniors certainly supported by Mike's data. There's a large number of older adults. You know what, I don't know what the other committees might be based on that data. I have to take a look. That was one that stood out though.
Yeah, it's conceivable also that a particular subcommittee that might be looking at a demographic, maybe going back to Mike, if Mike has the time and the information available, and he could generate some information that would be needed.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that to support a subcommittee. And I think there's a lot more we could do with the seniors to understand that population.
Yeah, and the ARP Affordable Cities, an incredible amount of information that's there. I believe I had sent out links to their website in the past. If you want, I could send the link out again. There certainly is plenty of information. We could certainly find information for populations with disabilities and so forth. So there's a lot that can be done there.
Sometimes though, the very data you want is hard to get, right? Like, so for at-risk youth and families, we're talking about really sensitive information. And so getting your hands on that is both hard well, useful if you can get it, but you have to be really careful about how you handle it and how you display it and all that stuff.
Gotcha. And yet we have a number of people here who are social workers, psychologists, and so forth, who have a lot of hands-on experience in this area and certainly can provide an incredible amount of direction to subcommittees. Okay, so again, my ask would be that you send me emails if you're interested in one of those subcommittees, and hopefully we could generate enough interest and get several of them up and running. I'd probably participate on several initially, but I don't know if I would stay on them. I think the best is for the other commissioners to be working them. Okay, can we, I'd like to move on. Under new business, so 2 items. One was the March and April commission meetings. So what I propose is that the March meeting just be at the same format as this meeting. I guess in a few weeks, we'd probably have a better idea if we could do it in person, but it's a good probability that it would remain as a Zoom meeting. I'll let you know what we determine. If the village is okay with having us meet in person, if our commissioners are comfortable with that, we can certainly meet in person. So John, did you have any question? You still got your hand up.
I was volunteering for either of those commissions, so you could add my name for either of those commission. Which one is
the subcommittees?
Yes, sir.
Which one?
I prefer assisting the seniors and the at-risk families, but if you don't have enough staff for the other subcommittees, feel free to input me in any subcommittees. I'm willing to work in any committees.
Great.
But
okay.
I prefer, assisting the senior citizens or at-risk families. That is what I am more, inclined to. But however, I am open to any committees which we really need assistance.
Okay. Can I ask Steele, just send me an email so I'll make sure I don't lose my note.
Sure, no problem.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
So we'll discuss in the next couple of weeks if we're going to have an in-person meeting or do it by Zoom. We'll see which way the COVID numbers are going. I'm the super optimist, looking how rapidly the Omicron infection is declining. Maybe everybody will feel comfortable. The April commission meeting, I would like to do what we've done yearly in the past, and that would be to have a dinner meeting, make it more of a social meeting rather than a business meeting. And in the past, we've ordered food from one of the local restaurants, served buffet style. Hopefully by that point, we'll be able to use the cafeteria, and we'll just divide up the cost between the commissioners. So anybody have any thoughts about it? Again, it all depends on how comfortable we are, where COVID has gone, and if the village is okay with that. Anybody, any thoughts or questions? Okay, Heather, you had a finger there, but I'm not sure it was a question or.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, let's see what we could do there, and if a couple commissioners would like to help out, participate on this, love to have you. So Jean?
No, I was just supporting that. It's a good idea.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Okay, and Josh? Oh, that's a thumbs up. Okay.
That's a thumbs up. That's right.
Gotcha. It wasn't the yellow hand.
No.
Okay, good deal. Okay, we'll see if we can pull it off. Finally, the last item I had was yesterday I had gotten a call from Jennifer Engel She's the Skokie Farmers Market Marketing Manager. And she asked if our commission would be interested in working with her to help organize a food drive at the farmers market. She envisions possibly a once a month food collection. It would be from 9 a.m. to noon. We'd probably have a table over there. We need volunteers to man the table during this period. What we're currently doing is every week we'll have several volunteers come at the end of the farmers market to pick up produce that's being donated by some generous farmers. Usually that's about a 45-minute commitment for whoever volunteers for that. Here we'd be looking for volunteers to cover about a 3-hour period, but we could certainly break that period up between 3 or 4 commissioners, and it doesn't have to be commissioners either. So what we had done with the food drive before, with the farmers market before, last year, I had created a site on Sign Up Genius, if you recall, and made it available so you could pick any day that you wanted to participate. It wound up that link to that site was distributed to the high schools, and the church had the link. So we had a lot of non-commissioners who had volunteered to help out, and it worked out terrifically. We had plenty of people each week. What we could possibly do is extend that approach using the Sign Up Genius to also cover the once a month farmers market, once a month food pickup or donation. So I throw it out, see what your interest would be in doing something like this, and if there's anybody who would like to play a leadership role on this.
I mean, I would be interested in doing that.
Okay.
I'd be interested in helping, but not leadership.
Okay. So you certainly have the Sign Up Genius to sign up for any dates that would be available. Okay. Do you, yeah, Wendy.
I will also help.
Pardon?
I will also sign up, like last year, I will also sign up in Sign Up Genius and go, volunteer some Sundays.
Okay. And Heather, would you like to do some leadership on it? Putting
Yeah, I'd be willing to do that.
Okay.
Sign up for these things. As someone who would love to be able to help, but sometimes can't plan several weeks in advance in terms of when I'll be available. It's always been disappointing to me when that initial email comes out that says sign up, and then all of the dates get filled. So like, if there were to be a Sunday that I was available, that I realized, the week before or 2 weeks before, the opportunity to help is gone. So if there's a way to sort of stagger it, maybe just a couple Sundays at a time, because there are definitely, I think, people who would be willing to help, but it's very hard, like in, May schedule for the entire summer comes out to know, like, oh, I'm going to be able to help, the second Sunday of August.
Gotcha.
And so then that gives many people, probably more people, the opportunity to help a couple times, and maybe cuts down perhaps on people who sign up for something many, many weeks in advance, only to have a conflict arise and then have nobody be there.
I think that's a real good suggestion. We can figure out how to handle something like that.
Definitely.
And with the vaccine clinic too, because they would like publish, so many dates at a time, and then all the spots would fill up. And now, I mean, there's fewer clinics now, but they're really just releasing the, slots sort of, 2 weeks ahead of time, with a little email saying, hey, we're opening up the spots, and that sort of gives everybody a chance to help, because I think that there's no shortage of people who want to help.
Good suggestion. We'll figure out how we could do something like that. What is nice about the Sign Up Genius is a few days or a week before, it does notify everybody who's signed up for that particular date, give them a little reminder, because otherwise, if they did it 2 months ahead of time, they wouldn't remember. And so I had on a number of occasions would get emails back from people saying, oh, sorry, we just got busy. But I didn't go back in and notify everybody else that there were some additional openings. So that's something that we need to do. Thanks. The other possibility is, along with the food drive, which would be monthly. And by the way, this is something that that Jennifer Engel had said they'd be able to get publicity out in the Skokie News. We could probably put signage up at the farmers market each week, announcing when the next food drive was going to be. They try to schedule them when they had other activities over at the farmers market, which would bring in additional people. For instance, they might have yoga at the farmers market, might be something they're looking at. Other possibilities. So hopefully working with her, she seemed very enthusiastic about having a very successful market. We could wind up with a successful food drive. One other possibility we've talked about, but we didn't come to any conclusions or thoughts about it, is it may be also possible to do a coat drive or a clothes drive at the same time. But that would depend on, for instance, if the what I just forgot the name of the church, St. Peter's Church, which has the clothes closet, if they'd be interested in accepting additional clothes, maybe we could do an additional drive at the farmers market to help supply clothes for the clothes closet.
Harold, if I may,
Yeah.
St. Peter or St. Paul's Lutheran Church, they're looking more for children's clothing now too, like kids' coats.
Okay.
So I was over there last month and talking with them there. So if anybody has any kids for old coats from kids or clothing, diapers, if you want to donate diapers, same as well as the township, they're always looking for donation for diapers or baby formula.
Good. Well, certainly.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. I spoke to Vicky at St. Paul's as well, and she said, they're taking all kinds of clothes, of course, but it's mainly children's clothes. They get a lot of families that come through there. So our church this month is collecting lots of clothes to try to take to them. And you brought up the collection of diapers, which at I think it was our last meeting in December, the Niles Township mentioned that is always a big need. I think that'd be something to consider, how maybe we could participate in that.
I think also great ideas over here. These are things I could get back to Jennifer in that regard. I could also touch base with the clothes closet over at St. Paul's, that I said it wrong, with St. Paul's Church, and determine if they'd be interested during the summer getting children's clothes from a clothes drive. And if so, we'll see if Jennifer would be interested in promoting that also. I think it could be a very successful addition to the collection. Heather, we'll touch base on that also. Is Heather still on?
Yep.
We'll touch base with that also.
Yes.
I smile. The one trouble with Zoom is that the pictures sometimes move around. So all of a sudden you're no longer in the spot that you were before. Okay. And I would be comfortable. I would think that we get a good number of volunteers through the Sign Up Genius to man a table and to do the pickup from the farmers market. Okay, with that, let me ask, is there any other additional new business that you'd like to discuss? Okay, you know, at our synagogue, whenever we're through with the board meeting over there, we always have a good and welfare section. So if anybody has anything good to report about their family, their friends, anything that's happening in the community, this would be a perfect opportunity to do it. Should we be adding a good and welfare to our meetings?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, well, if nothing good has happened, hopefully there have been plenty of good things that have happened. Yeah, Arnie.
The youth sign up for shoveling in Skokie has been very successful for my family.
Oh.
So
Great.
whoever in the village has coordinated that sign up of kids for doing a youth shoveling duty in the village, did an excellent job.
Great, thank you, Arnie.
I'm sure that you saw that our police also helped shovel snow. Did everybody see that?
Yes, did.
It got some news coverage. I thought that was a beautiful thing too.
I thought I might mention to whoever is going to be on the seniors committee that there was discussion on Skokie social media on those days the police were doing that. About the teen shoveling, and several people responded by saying that for seniors, the cost of the teen shoveling is really prohibitive. So that having the police available that day to help out was very helpful. And I don't know if there's a way to sort of expand on that. The teen shoveling is great because it gives the teens work to do, and it's great for households that have the means to hire them, but that still sort of leaves behind seniors who can't afford to pay the teens and might be stuck because of the snow. So, you know, issue that the seniors might address, finding, you know, a happy medium there.
No, I can talk to Anne Marie Benuzzi, who's overseeing the Teen League program. She's been working with the Skokie Library, and the library has a youth drop-in time. So maybe they can figure something out. I don't know, are the high schools still needing community service hours for high school students? If so, that would be a great way to get community service hours.
Great, and it would fulfill the needs
Right.
for some seniors. And I noticed online people were suggesting making donations to the benevolent fund at the police department to maybe help pitch in to buy some snow blowers and thereby increase the number of households they could visit. But on a day of snow, if they had to respond to a lot of traffic accidents or whatever, you of course couldn't count on the police to be available for that. So it would be nice if there were some less expensive options for seniors.
Good point. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add to either good and welfare or new business? If not, again, I thank everybody for coming to the meeting tonight. I think we had a great discussions. Again, thank you, Mike, for an incredible presentation. And we will be sending out, first I'll send, as soon as I get the presentation and Excel spreadsheet from Mike, I will distribute it to everybody. And then we'll keep you updated on where the March meeting is going to be, whether it will be in person or via Zoom. So with that, if there's, I guess we normally put, oh, yeah, go ahead, Edie.
I was just gonna say thank you to everybody for being here tonight, and we didn't have to drive in the snow to get to the meeting. And thank you to Joe for taking the minutes.
I move to adjourn.
Excellent. Okay, we adjourn and see you all next month.
Okay.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
They will